Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Coffee Talk. It's a very sunny day here in my office. I apologize for the lighting. My name is Sarah Castle. I am the Director of Southborough Youth and Family Services. And with me this morning, I have my partners in crime. I have Megan Island, our Assistant Director. Good morning, Megan.
Morning.
Morning. We have Shannon Knyman, who's our Program Coordinator. Good morning, Shannon.
Good morning, Sarah.
And we are excited to welcome a couple of members of our coalition. This is a long name, everyone, so stay with me for a second. The Northborough Southborough Substance Abuse Prevention Coalition. For the sake of conversation, we're going to be calling it the Coalition. Sounds so official. But we have Tara Rivera and Betina Shakespeare, who are both members of our coalition and also moms themselves. And we're going to be talking today about talking to your children about substance use. So ladies, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Sure. Let's start with our weekly coffee talk toast.
Cheers.
Cheers. We were just talking a second ago about how nobody really knows what each other is drinking at times, or at least people who are watching the show may not know that not everybody drinks coffee, and we were coming up with some alternate names like meet me at the water cooler, or or tea talk, or as my children like to say, juice box talk. All fun alternates to our name. So how's everybody doing this morning?
Very
Excited?
good.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, it's beautiful outside. It's we were also just talking a second ago about how all of a sudden it's spring. I mean, officially it's spring, but I feel like the weather transitioned very quickly from cold to comfortable. So
Don't put your mittens away yet.
I was going
though.
to say,
This-
fingers crossed it stays that way.
Yeah. Feel pretty
Murphy's
bad.
Law says.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we should be getting another 10 feet of snow in the next
Yeah,
few
don't
weeks.
say that. Don't say that.
But then it'll melt like the next day because it'll be like 97. So
Right. We'll all be sick with colds because our bodies don't know
Right.
what to do. Yeah. Well, happy spring anyway. It's officially here.
it is.
Yes. So Tara and Betina are here. Well, I guess I'll preface our conversation today by just saying all of us here have either thought to ourselves or heard someone else say at some point some variation of parenting is hard, or there is no handbook that comes with parenting. And that is absolutely true. We have personal experience with that, professional experience with that. And what comes with parenting is having to have lots of different conversations. There's the classic birds and bees conversation. Today, we're talking about how to navigate conversations about substance use with your children. This could apply to children of various ages. So we're going to talk a little bit about when it's a good time to start that conversation and why. And like on many other Coffee Talk episodes, we often talk about risk factors versus protective factors. And risk factors are probably more obvious ones, things that might predispose somebody to be at risk for something. Whereas protective factors are things that actually help protect people and young people from issues starting in the first place. And we know that the quality of a relationship and the relationship itself that children have with their parents really is a huge protective factor for youth, for future risk-taking behavior or developing substance use habits. So that's our quick sales pitch as to why this is an important conversation to have with your children. So maybe we should start. I kind of shared your names and shared that you're both coalition members and moms, but there's so much more to both of you. Maybe you guys could start by introducing yourselves to our audience. Tara, do you want to start?
Sure. My name's Tara Rivera, and I am a treatment advocate and a recovery coach at Recovery Centers of America. I am, as you mentioned, a mom. I have a 9-year-old daughter. She's in the 4th grade. And I also happen to be a person in long-term recovery, celebrating just over 2 decades of recovery at this point.
Wow,
Thank you.
that's awesome. Congratulations. And how about you, Betina?
Yes, hi, I'm Betina Shakespeare. I am a physician and I am a mother in this wonderful town of Southborough. I have 3 older children. They range from age 24 to 18. So I'm in the thick of things, if you want to call it that, and remain so with just personal experience and also with professional experience.
Great. Well, ladies, thank you both for coming on today.
Thank you. So like Sarah was saying, one of the questions that we wanted to ask and talk about was, when do we start this conversation? So different literature that you see, different things that you pick up, maybe middle school, or what do folks think? When's a good time to start?
Well, I mean, personally, because I am a person in long-term recovery, I know that genetics obviously plays a role in substance use, also trauma. I personally consider my daughter to be a high-risk child because she's been genetically predisposed to the disease, as well as has experienced some childhood trauma because her father and I have separated. So I began very early on with her, obviously not talking about addiction, drugs, or alcohol, but talking about our feelings and how we feel about things, and teaching her appropriate ways to communicate that. Also talk about making healthy choices, whether it's bedtime or deciding between like an apple and a cookie for a snack. So even very simple things like that, very, very early on, I've been mindful about what we talk about, how we talk about it, kind of almost setting the stage for that time when we're actually going to get into kind of the meat and the potatoes of it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I agree with Tara. I think the earlier you can begin these conversations, the better. It's funny, after having 3 children, I do believe that the way we approached it with our older child has been very different from the way we approach it from our younger child, and only because the younger child learns from what she sees with her siblings, or him, the younger child sees with their older siblings. We also happen to have a large extended family. So, but I know in our program, I know we start an outreach in the middle school through the coalition, which I think is absolutely appropriate. Early middle school years, which begin at 6th grade in Southborough. However, anytime an individual parent can start the conversations, Tara, you gave excellent examples, I think, of, making healthy choices and doing what is good for yourself and your body to help you grow and help you develop. And if speaking to a child in their language and trying to make them know that they are going to feel better and feel good every day and have fun and have good relationships with their peers. The earlier you can start those conversations, the better.
Mm-hmm. I love that, because you're using real life examples to sort of pick up on the theme of making healthy choices, so that once you get to, you're setting the stage or building a foundation for those conversations to happen later. Yeah.
And I come from a family planning background, so the awkward sex talk is, so that's something that I'm well versed in, and teaching parents how to do that. And it's really not different either. that the earlier you start conversations about anything that feels like it's taboo, the better, that it becomes normalized. And that some of it is you're giving information and just watching your kid. If the kid seems like they're confused or freaked out, that means stop right there. That's enough information. It's probably over their heads. And you pull it back and then just keep going with the conversation as they get older. So
So I guess just to go back to the original question of what age should you start doing this? I don't think any of us are saying the child should be 9 years and 4 weeks. And so it depends. But in general, the theme or the consensus here is to temper the information you're giving to your children so that it's appropriate for their age, but start the conversations as early as possible.
I also think when children ask questions, it's important to answer them honestly, again, in an age appropriate manner, but honestly, to shove things off and say, oh, we can talk about that later, or you don't need to worry about those things right now. That shouldn't pertain to you now, things like that. I don't think that's well, personally, I don't feel that that's the right way to approach things. Because I think if children are asking questions, then they're picking up cues somewhere, and it's important for you. That's a big red flag in a sense to start to guide them.
Yeah. I often say too, I go back to the genetics and all of that, just because of the way that I was raised. And I obviously was raised very differently than I'm raising my daughter. But my father had diabetes. And so I knew all about diabetes, as a kid, as a young kid. They were constantly telling me to, watch your sugar intake and, testing me quite frequently and, talking about what diabetes is and understanding what the signs and the symptoms are and all of that. That was very normalized conversation in our house because everybody was watching me for it because, my father had developed it when he was 13. So I think in the same way, we need to have those conversations with our kids. If we think about cancer or heart disease or diabetes that runs in the family, we talk about those things. We know as children of parents that have cancer or things like that, we're high risk. And so we need to normalize those conversations and have those conversations. I often, my daughter hears me on the phone a lot. I work from home and I obviously take calls nights and weekends as people are, in crisis. And I'm cognizant of the fact that she's around. So I'm cautious about the words that I use and how I speak to people. But she knows that I work at, Recovery Centers of America. She knows that I'm in recovery. And she knows that drugs and alcohol are bad, for people, to do it too often, right? When she gets older, I plan on having the conversation with her about the brain development and, the reason why, the legal age to drink alcohol is 21 is because that's really when your brain starts to develop and is able to handle those things. Statistically speaking, if we use alcohol or drugs prior to when our brain is fully developed, we're 44%, 40% more likely to develop an addiction as opposed to waiting until our brain's fully developed. Our chances go down to like 2 to 7%. So that's huge. And, of course, I never heard that as a kid growing up, never heard that in health education class. And I feel like there's a lot of kids nowadays that are smart enough to take that information and apply it and be able to use that as a tool, when they're peer pressured, I'm not saying I'm not going to do it, but I'm not going to do it right now. So I just feel like arming them with the facts is really, really important.
Yesterday when I was thinking about these conversations, it's funny, I thought just that when, how are you going to approach the fact that, let's say, marijuana is legalized here in our state? Like, what are you going to say to your kids? And one of the things I was thinking of that I've had these conversations with my children, at least, is that they are privy to so much more information than we were back then. And we didn't, as you pointed out, Tara, we did not have that information. We did not know those statistics. We did not understand the ramifications of starting to drink alcohol early in our lives or try other substances. And I think you're correct. They're privileged in the sense that they really do have all this information and they can make educated decisions about their future and what they want for themselves. And I have used that argument several times with my children. And even in the coalition, when we're talking to parents at some of the, I guess the exhibits that we've had, I think it's very important to lay out these facts for them again in a way that they can understand and keep reminding them as they get older.
Mhm.
So that was actually going to be one of my questions was, how can parents sometimes handle those kinds of questions from kids about well, it's legal, weed is legal now, especially in many states, especially Massachusetts. So what's the big deal? Or for teenagers who might say to their parents, I see you drinking, I see you smoking, so why is it a problem? So it sounds like you guys are saying, arming the adolescents with information about how it impacts their brains and their development is a good tool for, and giving them information. It would be a good approach to responding to those kinds of comments. Do you have any other suggestions?
Well, I always go to, cigarettes are legal, tobacco is legal, alcohol is legal. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's good for you.
Mhm.
And then I go back always to just the brain development and that your brain's not ready. Your body may feel like you're ready. You may feel like you're ready. Your friends may already be doing it, but there's long-term consequences. And if you hold off just a little longer, it reduces your chances of, for me and with me in my conversation with my daughter, it reduces the risk of you becoming addicted later. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm saying don't do it right now. Like your brain is not equipped to handle that.
Mhm.
So I have those conversations and never really try to get into, should it be legal? Should it not be legal? I kind of like avoid, those types of conversations. Is it harmful? Is it not harmful? Well, if you tune into any, YouTube video that Dr. Ruth Poteet puts out there about, marijuana and the teenage brain, the marijuana that's out there now is not what was out there, 20, 30, 40 years ago. So, what, it is kind of harmful depending on, where it was grown and how it was manufactured. And now there is actually fentanyl found in marijuana. So I can attest to that working in the treatment field. And I've had conversations with family members that, older nephews and nieces that, openly, smoke, and they, they're not ashamed of it. And they're like, it's legal, it's not a big deal. And, we have those conversations in a judgment-free way, because I never want them to feel less than, or that I'm looking down on them, or that I'm persecuting them. Those are their choices. And I want them to know that I love them regardless. And I'm always here to have that conversation or have that, offer that support to them if they feel like they need to stop and they're having trouble stopping. But that it is potentially harmful. And just, arm yourself with the facts. If you're going to make that decision, at least know everything about what it is that you're getting yourself into.
Mhm. Sorry, I was just going to say, I wanted to highlight that because I think that it's really important in, whatever you're talking about with your kids, not just substance use, but that judgment-free zone is really, you want to create a relationship where they can return to you, and that they want to seek you out. And if they're shut down, or if they feel as though they're going to be punished, or, certainly as a parent, your hands are tied, that you do have to have some level of consequences for some things. But you do want to foster as much as possible that relationship and communication where they do continue to seek you out, for more information or validation, or to explore things. Sorry, Betina, go ahead. I knew you
No,
were
go
gonna
ahead.
chime in.
Absolutely. The judgment-free zone is important. And you know, at least in my household, my kids are very open. As a matter of fact, when I joined the coalition, I went to my oldest child and I'm like, okay, mom's not in on all this stuff. I don't understand. Can you help me? Like, did kids do this? Did kids hide this? What did you guys do? And she was very much willing to help me, you know, laughing at the same time, saying, no, mom, that really doesn't happen. You guys just don't get it. And so my other two jumped in, you know, my oldest, and it was actually, it became a family activity to create this exposition that we did, you know, the hidden in plain sight, and they helped me with it. It was funny, but good, you know, it made them, and I laughed and did a scare tactic in the household saying, all right, everything is open for me finding anything in this household because it's my house, you know, and they got a kick out of it. But in a sense, I just said, look, guys, it's my house. And I know this is your space, but I don't look for things, you know, and if I find things, I find them. But on top of that story, the one thing I wanted to mention is, sadly, I don't like to use scare tactics. I'm not that kind of parent, and I'm not very good at like punishing my children. I'd rather just be open with them and talk to them and tell them if something's been a disappointment to us and how that can change. But sadly, you know, the whole marijuana with fentanyl or drugs with fentanyl, you know, there have been extended family members that they've had to deal with and see bad consequences from bad decisions. And all it takes sometimes is a reminder, sadly, that one bad decision in 1 minute can change your whole life. And it makes them stop and think and reflect. And I know that with each of them, thinking about situations that they've been, you know, that they've been, or they've experienced, or they've heard about, or they've read about, or they're connected to somehow, makes them think twice. And so I'm not saying you need scare tactics, but sometimes real life situations, you know, reminders can be quite meaningful for them to really see what's going on. Because you can spew out facts, but for some people it doesn't matter. Others it will.
I think what you're saying too, Betina, is that sometimes it's that personal connection that makes something click, that you can give facts, you can give information, but when it's in your circle, it makes it that much more real.
Yeah. I just wanted to mention a couple of other things that you know, you can find in literature about talking to your children about substance use, that, you know, everybody's household is different and how you approach it, but setting clear expectations, you know, as far as what you expect from your children, also, you know, what consequences there may be as a result, but also, you know, opportunities for you know, celebrating accomplishments and reinforcing positive decision making. All of those things should be talked about openly and be very clear. And that really helps your children up front as they approach an age where they might be encountering substance use, and be faced with difficult decisions. To have that in mind, you know, and kids may be angry about it, but they will thank you later. They don't realize what a safety net that is for them, to have these parameters and expectations in place. You know, it's that in and of itself is a protective factor. I guess the other thing I wanted to mention too is that it's really imperative that we as parents be thinking about what we're modeling. You know, it may not even be talking about their use, but also be mindful of our own use. And, you know, here we're talking about marijuana and alcohol use, or cigarettes, or, you know, so we want to be mindful of our use in front of our children. You know, I know this exists in family cultures a lot, that when families get together, everybody's has a glass of wine or whatever it is. But be also mindful of the conversations you're having about substance use. You know, you want to avoid telling stories or talking excitedly about, you know, that time that in college, you know, that everybody did whatever it was they did. I think that's really critical, that you're modeling good decision making for your children as well.
And substance
on-
use. Oh, go ahead,
Oh,
Betina.
go ahead. Sorry. On that note, I just wanted to say that we have a really close neighborhood here.
Mhm.
And Southborough is not an area where we grew up. So my family members are scattered throughout other states,
Mhm.
but our neighborhood is very close. And each of us have said to our friends' children as they got older, and it's so funny because we've all done it. You know, if you're ever out and you don't want, you're like in a situation where you can't get home or you feel unsafe and you don't feel comfortable calling your parents, call me. We'll come anytime, any time of the day, any time of the night, and nothing will be said. You can trust us. And you know, I've had the conversation with my friends, older children. My friends have had conversations, I know, with my children when they were going through their teen years. So creating, again, a non-judgmental safety net for them is extremely important. And it's important, I think, you know, we're talking about our homes and our kids, and how it's really important for them to have other people, other adults to go talk to, because they don't always want to talk to just their parent. So if that can be created somehow, whether it's a teacher, you know, a coach, a neighbor, it's really, I think it's very helpful and beneficial.
Yeah, Tara, you were talking about that when we met about this episode and preparing for a conversation, that even the safety net piece, absolutely, but even just those preventative conversations that we all have experienced. I think we mentioned that this happens in marriages too sometimes, that what you say to your family member is, you know, they're just not as receptive to it as is, you know, if it came from a third party. And Terry, you had given an example of when you were growing up. You want to share that?
So yeah, I mean, no one really talked to me about that growing up. I saw it in my home, you know, and I remember when I first got sober, I was only 19, and you know, I went into a 12-step meeting, and you know, it was challenging to be surrounded by older women at the time, on my mom and my mom's friends, and kind of felt like they were telling me what to do, like they kind of always did. And then a friend of mine from high school came walking in the meeting, and she was sober, and I was like, oh my gosh, you're sober, what are you doing here? And she's like, what are you doing here? And it kind of made it relatable. And I was like, okay, so this is not just me, like I'm not the only one, there's other people my age, and this is cool. And it was a huge help to me. I mean, I don't know what I would have done, had I not bumped into somebody my age, back then. And so even then, I also was teaching a class at Anna Maria recently, and I had some folks with lived experience come in and share their story, because I think that, like you said, you need to hear it from different angles and different people. And here I am kind of teaching this class. So I'm the professor. Yes, I have lived experience, but I wanted somebody else to come in on the students level to be able to share with them. So I was able to find a 22-year-old with 5 years of recovery, got sober at 17 years old, to come in and just share, what that looked like for him, using at such a young age, and discovering so early on that he had a problem, thanks to his parents being able to nip it in the bud. And the students were just like, wow, because I think there's just an awful lot of denial. And sometimes people just turn their brain off when mom's chatting or dad's chatting or their teacher, they're like, yeah. But if you can find somebody that can speak to them, that's on their level, I think it makes a world of difference.
mentorship is a huge protective factor for all kinds of risky behavior. And I think that this is right now is a good plug for the coalition that, you know, if you're out there watching, for real though, that if you're out there watching and this is a topic that you feel passionately about, that you have something to add, or that even if it's just, you know, you're what we call a caring adult, that if you're someone that wants to share that with the youth in our community, you know, the coalition is a great place to be, to share that, to help with that message, because the more caring adults that are out there that have that kindness, that caring about kids, that, you know, again, parents are so important, but having that other adult or even someone close to a kid's age that can be a mentor, so important. So
like I keep picturing these like different safety nets. Your home is one, you've got this community safety net. Yeah. We had so many other great questions, and darn it, this went by too fast, as it usually does. We were gonna talk about red flags, which is probably a whole other conversation.
Yeah.
You know, I think this is fitting because we're talking about just how to approach the conversation, and I think that what to do if you are concerned is a whole other topic. So maybe we have to have you guys back for a part 2 at some point soon. But we will definitely post some information about how to get involved in the coalition. So again, that's the Northborough Southborough Substance Abuse Prevention Coalition. Just rolls off the tongue, doesn't it? Or also known as the coalition. But please feel free to message us. You can get connected to that group through Southborough Youth and Family Services, or our counterpart in Northborough, which is Northborough Family and Youth Services. And so we'll share our contact information with you guys in the comments. Tara and Betina, thank you so much. This did go by fast, right? It was not enough time. We have so many more things to say, but I think at least a good starting point to encourage parents to have these important conversations with their children. Next week, which is the 30th, March 30th, we're nearing the end of March. We're excited to welcome Johanna Sagarin. Johanna is the clinical director at Ellsworth Child and Family Counseling Center, but she's also the program director at the Carriage House Grief Support Center. Unfortunately, you know, many of us, it's a part of life. This is actually going to be part of our conversation, but grief and loss are a part of life. Just like we were talking about today, it's important for us to be talking about this within our families. It's a hard thing to navigate sometimes. So this is the work that Johanna does, and she's going to be joining us next week on Coffee Talk to talk to us a little bit more about how to navigate grief and loss. So we hope to see you then. Ladies, thank you for being here, and we'll see you guys next week.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for having me.
Bye.